It's June, and you know what that means. It's Men's Mental Health Month. So I'm here to tell you what your therapist didn't tell you about men's mental health. In particular, we're going to talk about depression in men, because this is very different than women experiencing depression. So let's dive right in. When we're talking about men's mental health, specifically when we're talking about depression, we want to have a general understanding of what the presentation looks like that is different than women. So women generally come into therapy and sit down and have a consult and talk about how sad, how lonely they feel rejected by others, and this cycles for them. Men are a little bit different. They don't necessarily recognize the sadness within them. Instead, what they are tuned to is anger, intense anger. Sometimes it's repressed, so they don't even know that they're angry. They can just feel this sensation in their body. But majority of men will come in and sit down, and when they're consulting with my team, they're talking about how angry they are and how they need anger management as opposed to feeling depressed. In addition to irritability, men will be workaholics. So it's easy to distract the mind. We're just going to work. We're just going to do what we typically do on a day-to-day. So we don't think about how we feel. We don't think about what's going on in our lives. And we don't have to attack the self, essentially feeling as though you're not living up to your ideal. Another presenting factor includes risk behavior. So risky behavior might include behavior that is unsafe, such as engaging in prostitution or engaging in substance use, or risky behavior could be seen within the context of somewhat being functional, such as taking more risks at work or taking more risks in your personal life, such as investing more in the stock market when maybe you don't have that money to use to invest. Maybe that money should be going to bills instead. Emotional numbing is another factor that contributes to men's depression. So this can be in the form of, again, distraction through work or other things, but this can also be in terms of substance use. People can numb, men can numb using alcohol, using other recreational substances in order not to feel those very hurt and overwhelming feelings. As I mentioned, sometimes men don't even know that they're experiencing depression. Instead, they're feeling it in their body. So they might be fatigued, or they might be experiencing back pain or leg pain or some form of somatic complaint. And that is a good indication, among other presenting factors, that you might be struggling with depression. Now, why is this significant? Well, because according to research, majority of men who struggle with depression, whether they know it or not, are also at risk for suicidality. According to research, women generally attempt suicide 2 to 4 times more than men. However, men tend to die by suicide 3 to 4 times more than women. And this is usually because the means that they use to end their life, firearms or hanging, is usually a final act. Whereas women generally use more substances to overdose. So in doing so, they actually unintentionally create more time where they're able to access now emergency services, whereas the use of a firearm or hanging, there's a limited time frame where emergency services can intervene. So we're talking about some pretty heavy stuff here. So it's really important to understand, men, what your presenting factors look like when you're experiencing depression. So from a psychoanalytic perspective, depression is not just encompassing criteria within a category. It doesn't just include symptoms, and it doesn't just focus on one's mood. It actually encompasses one's personality structure. So individuals who are struggling with depression, especially men struggling with depression, at the core of their personality, they're also struggling with guilt, shame, and this self-hatred. This often emerges from deeply wounded patterns that occurred in childhood. One core feature about the depressive personality structure, at least according to Nancy McWilliams in the Psychoanalytic Diagnostic book, is we highlight that there's a particular depressive defense that individuals generally tend to use, which involves projective identification. So what's happening, people like men, for instance, are confusing what is happening internally with something that is happening externally. So as an example, they might remember something in childhood, right? For example, you might remember something that happened to you in childhood, and this created anger, this enraged you. But instead of getting upset at the people or the situation in which constructed that rage, you instead turn that anger inwards and then you attack yourself. So if you remember an instance with mom, there was a dynamic that happened that made you really angry growing up. So instead of getting angry at mom and reflecting on that anger towards mom, you instead redirect the anger towards yourself. You've disappointed yourself, you've affected yourself, and now this gives you reason to hate on yourself. So there's a confusion between the internal sensations and what you're feeling and what's actually happening externally. There's this excessive amount of guilt, and this could be very unconscious as well. So for instance, the conscious guilt, you may feel as though you respond to other people's pain, or you're very in tune to other people's pain. So you might walk on eggshells a little bit more in order to ensure that people are feeling more comfortable or happy around you. This way, if you're pleasing other people, then you don't have to get that aggression or the dislike or disappointment that is directed towards you, because this may have occurred as a trauma during your childhood, where a parent or both parents articulated their disappointment in you or articulated this harsh judgment upon you, and you begin to internalize it as if you're doing something wrong, as if you're a terrible person. So then over time you grew up to people please as an unconscious way of pleasing your parents. So then you're very much attuned when you're at the office, when you're at school, when you're interacting with strangers. No matter what social dynamic that you find yourself in, you generally tend to people please to avoid the trauma or aggression that you've experienced in childhood. Additionally, if there's unconscious guilt, then this stems usually from infancy. So for instance, you might have been left in your crib crying, you're hungry, need to be changed, you're tired, you want attention, something is going on, but you're not being tended to. You're not taken care of the way in which you need to be taken care of. So then as this dynamic continues over time, the child tends to figure out or tries to theorize why this might be the case, why the parent or parents aren't so attentive or so harsh, or why is, mom or dad so cold or angry towards me. So as children start to grow up, because they're more egocentric in their thinking, they can only see or think from their perspective, especially very young kids. Kids tend to theorize that something is wrong with them, that they've done something wrong, and as a result, their parents hate them. They unconsciously grow up with this now core belief that stems from their trauma, and now this is projected onto other people in adulthood. Now as if you, who holds this guilt, needs to continually please everyone that you encounter. Because if you don't, then you're going to feel this attack on yourself. You're going to remember that you're such an awful person, and this gives you reason to continue the attack on yourself. Another core component of the psychoanalytic depressive personality structure includes individuals who exhibit high empathy. So men can exhibit very, very high empathy, meaning that they can feel or have a sense of what someone is going through. And again, this stems from the unconscious trauma that is buried beneath the surface. Because men, and women as well, but I'm speaking to men in particular because it's buried under defense mechanisms, so this way it doesn't come out. But there's this high sense of empathy because you can unconsciously project yourself into other people who you deem as suffering. So if you see an injustice, there's something that's going on and you're witnessing this dynamic, you can have a sense of how this person is feeling, if this person is suffering in the moment. Whatever is going on, you can feel their pain because you've experienced that pain previously. So there's this high sense of empathy, and that comes from the inner child's wounds. And the adult now is connecting with the inner child's part of the psyche, remembering the trauma that has occurred. But again, this is a little bit removed because it is not so direct in the sense of men identifying that this has happened to them before and they're triggered, and they're experiencing feelings or thoughts in association with what the inner child felt historically. Now, that doesn't happen. That level of insight typically isn't there. Instead, what happens is men will feel it again somatically, feeling it physically, or they will start to feel very angry. So they start to feel these feelings, they start to feel hurt on behalf of someone else because they're witnessing this injustice. And now all of a sudden, this is affecting them, creating this sense of anger. So you see how these factors are contributing and they're cycling, and these factors are interacting with one another. So essentially, when it comes to the depressive personality structure for men in particular, it's so advantageous to understand what the psychoanalytic factors are, because then you can start to identify aspects of your own depression. And you might not even realize that you're suffering from depression. And again, this could have very well stemmed from the trauma during infancy, all the way to childhood, adolescence, and adulthood. So by you understanding the dynamic of trying to people please because you are projecting this need to please your parents, because you unconsciously feel so guilty that you've done something wrong, that you need to place yourself in a position to be liked, to be adored, so then the people pleasing is the way to do that. Now that defense stops you from feeling the hurt, from feeling the pain, from feeling the suffering that you've endured growing up. And even though it is very unpleasant and can be very overwhelming, it is most important that you process that pain. Because if you process that pain and you're able to position yourself in such a way as to get angry at what has happened to you, then you're going to find yourself feeling more relief in the moment. The adult can start processing for the inner child what happened to the inner child, because we can't change what happened to the child. We can't change history. But what we can do is we can understand what is going on in the unconscious. So then this way, we don't have to live or relive what has happened in the past in the future. We don't have to unconsciously act out the trauma that has occurred in the past, again, as an unconscious way to try to rectify the wrong that has happened. Instead, you can break through those defenses of projective identification and repression and process that pain little by little. The more that you do this, the more in which you will experience symptom relief. It takes time, and again, it could be an emotional roller coaster, but the more in which you do this, just like going to the gym and working out and building muscle, the more in which you do this, your psyche will build muscle. You will be able to take on more stressful situations, and you will be more responsive than reactive. I hope understanding these factors and identifying these factors have really helped you. You also have an opportunity to purchase a self-help course that can help you dive deeper and give you a little bit of guidance in terms of what approaches, what techniques, what coping strategies you can use in order to get the ball rolling to process that pain. So if you'd like, you can access the Ultimate Mental Health Toolbox, Mastering the Skills Therapists Use. I'll provide the link below in the description, so then this way you can access it. It has 4 core features to that online course. So you'll go through cognitive behavioral therapy, what that is, what the techniques are, how to practically apply this to your depression, as well as dialectical behavioral therapy, psychoanalytic psychotherapy, and existential psychotherapy. You've got this. Just one foot in front of the other. Take one step towards your mental health to process your pain. You can start by doing this on your own, and then you can ask for help, ask for reinforcements. And you can do this through booking a consultation and finding out what therapeutic options are available for you. So make sure that you take very good care of yourself, and you have a wonderful self-care day.